Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale, and you know what? Another week has gone by, and honestly, the news hasn't gotten that much better for all Arizona teams. We'll get to that, but it's been a newsworthy week since Shane and I were last with you. So a lot to discuss. Now, I'll tease our guest now. The Professor Matt Moreno will be joining us. First time in 3 months since we've had him on, and we'll be looking to get some feedback on football, basketball. Maybe some other things that we will discuss. But Shane, I mean, is there any good news in your opinion that just right off the bat, tell me something good?
UCLA lost. I
actually needed them to win for my bracket, even though my bracket was toast anyway.
Sorry, and Mick Cronin, he is in predictable Mick Cronin fashion, blamed the officials as much as he possibly could. But no, that's pretty much it. I was just happy that certain teams lost, and now that Arizona's out, you kind of just rooting for chaos in the NCAA tournament, which we definitely have. Never a good thing when it's Final Four weekend, and we in Arizona Wildcats podcast is already pivoting to football. But here we are again. Looking forward to chatting with Matt about it. But yeah, not a lot between transfer portal stuff and baseball and softball not really taking the edge off lately.
They stink right now. Stink.
It's been as we say in the corporate world, there are opportunities for improvement for sure.
Well, let's get right to it. This is Buy or Sell, presented by our friends at Ice Shaker. Go to iceshaker.com. Use promo code Wildcat Country, capital W, capital C, and get $5 off one of those beauties that Shane is drinking. Or you can go to fanatics.com and buy your official Arizona Wildcats Ice Shaker on there. All right, Shane. Number one, it is fair to be worried about Arizona's men's basketball future with the roster so uncertain for next season. Buy or sell?
Well, sure, I'll buy it. And that, look, Tommy Lloyd is just 2 years into a head coaching job. We don't really know to the extent of how great a recruiter he's going to be for this program. I mean, he's brought in some international guys. He brought in some decent transfers with Courtney Ramey and Cedric Henderson this past year. Obviously, Omar Bala was a transfer as well and followed him to Tucson. Kylan Boswell looks great as a recruit, but yeah, it's hard to say just how good he's going to be. Look, we're still kind of shedding that final layer of the Sean Miller era, and with one guy we're going to talk about soon who just announced his transfer, and then with Tubelis, we'll have to wait and see. And this is becoming more and more his team. We don't know what that's going to look like. I mean, Arizona's success, I know the NCAA tournament issues notwithstanding, their regular season and Pac-12 tournament success under Tommy Lloyd has been largely with a lot of Sean Miller's guys. Even this past season, two of the top guys were his. So I'm not worried yet. I think that Tommy Lloyd is going to put together a solid class, and we'll talk to Matt Moreno about that a little bit too. I think a lot of dominoes are going to fall these next few weeks, obviously, but certainly it's tough to know what to expect from Tommy Lloyd, because typically, in the Sean Miller era, and granted that was before the transfer portal, so a lot of things were different, and before NIL, but he would typically have 3 or 4 great high school commits lined up at this point. But when you think about, you look at the Elite Eight teams, there was one out of all 8 teams, there was one player, one starter who was a true freshman. So maybe that's where Tommy Lloyd's looking. But until those pieces come into place, sure, there's cause for concern. I understand that.
As a side note, Shane, I am not concerned, so I'm gonna sell this one. First of all, I am not concerned at all. I trust Tommy to bring the right pieces to the roster. But I'm gonna add a bonus question to this one, Shane. Buy or sell? Enough with the foreign players on Arizona's recruiting radar, or because the tendency is, and the reason I say that, the tendency is they tend to be softer than, let's say, American-born players. Not necessarily, that's a stereotype. Buy or sell that enough for the foreign players. I want some homegrown kids.
One of the comments we saw, and I think it was on our last our comment on the YouTube channel, comment in our last episode, someone said that the international guys, they don't have that fire come tournament time. It doesn't mean as much to them because they didn't grow up knowing how much it meant. I don't really know how true that is. Maybe there's something to that. As far as a softness, I think that maybe that's a bit of a stereotype, but I do think there's no doubt that, just about every international guy says it takes a little while to get used to the American game, to the speed of the game, especially, and sometimes the physicality as well. I would like to see more of a mix. Certainly if he brings on a talented international guy or two, I'd love that. Primarily international guys, no. I think Tommy Lloyd is going to come up with a healthy mix of maybe another international player or two some solid transfer portal guys. I don't know if he's going to bring in any more high school candidates, maybe another one. I don't know. But yeah, I to say enough of the international guys, no. I think that they've proven to be valuable assets, and I still think Azuolas Tubelis should have been Pac-12 Player of the Year, despite some of his issues. But I think it's fine to continue to use that pipeline. There are talented guys overseas. Tommy Lloyd is in tune with that, and there's no reason to not continue to utilize that.
I think your answer was very good, and I have nothing more to add to it, so I'll just roll with that. Number 2, Shane, losing Kirk Kriisa to the transfer portal, and then Adama Ball, both are significant losses going forward by yourself.
Well, let's start with Adama Ball. I think we knew he was going to go. He couldn't get on the court this season. We thought he was going to be a solid contributor off the bench of nothing else. We saw glimpses of that late last season, and it just didn't materialize this season, and that's really unfortunate. So not surprised that he's leaving at all. So it hurts in that he never became a key contributor, because that could have made a difference come tournament time. But obviously going forward, he couldn't get on the court this season. I don't know if he's going to at Arizona. So it's unfortunate, but it is what it is with him. With Kirk Kriisa, I think he saw the writing on the wall with Kylan Boswell. I don't think he wanted to go into year 4 of his collegiate career having to compete for a starting job, essentially, at the point guard position. We talked about the possibility of them playing together, which they did at some points last season, but certainly in the transfer portal, that if Arizona lands a great shooting guard, then maybe that's out the window too. So I think Kerr wanted to go somewhere where he knows that he's going to be the starter from day one, and there's not going to be that competition. So I don't blame him. And I have mixed feelings about it. I have mixed feelings about Kirk Kriisa, like everyone does. He had some clutch shots. He's a great passer. Also did some stupid stuff. So it certainly hurts in terms of depth. I'm not terribly shocked. He wasn't Tommy Lloyd's guy from day one, but it hurts. And as far as Arizona's going to miss his passing, as far as the rest of Kirk Kriisa, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm gonna sell this one. I don't think it's all that significant. I know that probably some of you will disagree with that take. Kirk Kriisa, I appreciate all that he did at Arizona, but I don't think he was the right player to lead Arizona to the promised land.
Yeah.
Adama Ball, I think, is I don't think it makes difference. Outside of playing in Vegas, Adama Ball never did anything, which is sad. Whether he didn't get an opportunity because he wasn't good in practice or whatnot, so be it. He's insignificant to the future, unfortunately, and I wish him well at another school. As far as Kirk Kriisa goes, I don't want to be a hater, but I think Arizona will be just fine with Boswell and whoever they bring in to either be the backup point guard or to run a 2-point guard system. If they go that route, I think Kirk Kriisa will be much more easily replaced than this next person, which leads into number 3, Shane. If Azuolas Tubelis goes pro as expected, and we'll talk to Matt Moreno about that, it is virtually impossible for Arizona to be a top 15 team next year. Buy or sell?
Without the transfer portal, I'd buy it 100%. Yeah, he led the conference in points and rebounds. Mm-hmm. And Kirk Kriisa, by the way, led the conference in assists. So that's the big reason that he's going to be missed. He's a fantastic passer. But yeah, if Tubelis leaves, who do you have left from this past season? From that core 7, you have Pella Larson, Umar Ballo, and Kylan Boswell. And then after that, who knows? Henry Vasar, Philip Borovicinen, will he be in the play? Will Dylan Anderson decide to stick around? He didn't see the court as a freshman. So it puts him in a tenuous position. But in the transfer portal era, you never know. You never know how he'll be able to fill out that roster. Mm-hmm. I was a little underwhelmed by what Tommy Lloyd did in the transfer portal last season. And I think he was a bit hamstrung because we didn't know what Dalen Terry was going to do for a long time. And I legitimately think Dalen Terry didn't know up until close to the draft what he was going to do. Hopefully that if Tubelis decides to leave, hopefully he makes the decision soon. Because I think Tommy Lloyd will do a decent job.
I think I'm going to interrupt you here, Shane. I think Tommy at this point believes that Tubelis is gone until proven otherwise. So we're going to go recruit.
You have to operate that way. Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You can't be like Dalen, where will he, won't he? I mean, you got to have learned your lesson from last year. You got to assume he's gone.
But I think it's also with Tommy Lloyd. I think he probably actively tried to recruit guys from the portal while Dalen Terry's making that decision. But I think a lot of guys were like, "Look, is he staying or not? Because if he stays, I may have to play behind him for a year, and I don't want to do that. Especially guys who maybe had one more year to play. So that's the problem. So I'm sure Tommy Lloyd is actively recruiting and trying to get guys from the portal, and that's going to ramp up more in the next several weeks as more and more guys enter the portal. But I think that it's tough. Like if Tubelis decides to take a couple of months and wait and see, then it might be tough to bring on a guy who may be his successor if they know, especially if a guy who's like a grad transfer who only has 1 year. And it's like, look, I'm not going to come if I'm going to have to play behind this guy. So I think that's the conundrum. And hopefully Tubelis decides one way or the other sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I would hope so as well. I don't expect him to come back. I would assume Tommy Lloyd doesn't either, but we'll ask Matt. Maybe Matt Moreno will have some insight on that maybe you and I don't know as of now. All right. As a side note, kind of a bonus question. I guess how I feel, Shane, do you feel the same way as far as I'm just actually excited to see how this offseason plays out? And I'm very interested in the transfer portal. Like I've already bookmarked the top 25, or the 24/7 sports transfer portal list. Like I'm super excited about it because I feel like Tommy Lloyd's going to hit it hard and hit the top of it real hard. Would you buy or sell that?
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. And AZ Desert Swarm has a list of 5 players already who are possibly connected to Arizona. But yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to this becoming more Tommy Lloyd's team. Maybe I dwell too much on that, but I feel like once the guys are there specifically for you, as in, well, I don't want to leave the university. I'll hang around even though you're not the coach who recruited me. I think that's a better situation, even though, look, I think Arizona's better if Tubelis comes back next season. Don't get me wrong. But I think the more this becomes Tommy Lloyd's team, the better off things are going to be. And we have that turnover. And, certainly in the transfer portal, everyone who comes to Arizona via the transfer portal signed up to play for someone else. But at least they're coming to play for Tommy Lloyd, as in they're just sticking around when Tommy Lloyd joined the program. I really think that makes a difference. Maybe I'm making too big a deal of it, but I think that this program is you still have that bit of the transition period from the Sean Miller era. Mm-hmm. And once it becomes all Tommy Lloyd's, I think that they're going to have more success. And I think that's going to translate to success in the tournament. And look, I say more success. I mean, for goodness sake, they've had 2 great regular seasons. There are 2 Pac-12 tournament championships, a regular season championship, Maui Invitational championship. So they've had a lot of regular season success. But I think that the NCAA tournament success will come a little bit more when guys are here specifically for Tommy Lloyd.
I certainly hope so, Shane. And by the way, right now, 24/7 Sports has Kirk Kriisa listed as the 15th best eligible transfer. I expect Tommy Lloyd to exceed that with at least one player that he brings in, just a hunch play. And that's why I'm excited about the transfer portal this offseason. What I also want to see is an alpha. We know Kylan Boswell. I believe that Kylan Boswell can be one. I don't think Arizona has another one on the roster. And you can't really count big men as alphas because you need somebody who has the ball in their hands every play, basically, right?
It's about guards in college basketball.
I want Arizona to find somebody who is Ben Mathurin light. And I know that's not easy to find a lottery pick light, but that is what I expect. I'm just saying. All right, number 4, Shane. Let's kind of pivot a little bit. The women's team, you talk about transfers. I mean, it's been an absolute mess over there. Number 4, it's fair to be very concerned about all of the roster movement on Adia's roster.
A little concerned, maybe not as much as you might be. They've got some great freshmen coming in, a great freshman class. Helena Pueyo said she's going to come back next season. But yeah, some surprises, at least from my perspective. Lauren Ware, who didn't get to see the court due to an injury this past season. And Maddie Connor, who is I know she wasn't the top contributor on this team, but she's a great outside shooter. She's a clutch free throw shooter. I was kind of surprisised to see her go.
Paris Clark,
Paris Clark as well, yeah. So it's going to look very, very different, and we'll see what Adia is able to do in the transfer portal. I mean, this past season she did a great job bringing in some talent, including from ASU and Jade LaVille, who was definitely a key contributor. But the women's team may look even more different than the men's team. So concerned, but I think this is going to be Adia's time to shine. And look, and she's even come out and said, look, I'm not the right coach for everyone. She's not out there begging. And I kind of like that. And I think recruits are going to like that as well. I don't think she's going to have a problem filling out this roster and putting together at least another top 25 team next season. I'm confident in that.
All right. So I'm going to say this before I expect us to talk to Adia at some point, probably over the next few months. Yeah, I'm actually very concerned, Shane. Like, this is last offseason we saw a number of players transfer out, and then this offseason. So obviously there's something going on. This is a top 25 program. Like, the girls should be flocking to come and stay at Arizona to keep their spot. And we're losing even potential starters elsewhere. Like, that is a problem.
You never know what goes on behind the scenes. And Adia could have she could have been very upfront with these. Like, she's very upfront. She's very candid. And she could have been upfront with her team and said, look, we're going to hit the transfer portal hard. And your job, you're expecting to step up and be a starter next season. You're going to have a lot of competition. And I would be surprised if she had that conversation. A lot of these athletes said, you know what? Okay, let's go somewhere where we know we can start. Like Maddie Connor could probably start at a mid-major easily, or even another Power 5 school that's not quite as talented. So I'm guessing, and maybe I'm hoping that that's what happened. And I think it kind of was, because I think Adia is that kind of coach. So until further notice, no, I'm not concerned. She's been a heck of a recruiter in terms of bringing in great high school athletes. I'm confident she'll be able to.
But she's not keeping him long term, though, Shane. That's the issue.
That's. I think it's happening everywhere. Like,
it's a top 25 program.
I know
you shouldn't. I mean, if the men's team were losing players like impact, like if Pella Larson, Umar Balo were to transfer, and that's kind of what this is the equivalent of. You're like, these are not players that are going pro. It's not, Kate Reese is one thing because she exhausted her 5 years of eligibility.
Yeah. At
this point, though, where's the veteran leadership on Arizona's squad right now?
Yeah. And I certainly don't expect him to be a championship contender next season, but I still think Adia can put together a top 25 team next season, and I will die on that hill until proven otherwise.
We'll ask her, and I will, and I'm sure she'll be forthright, and that's what we always appreciate about Coach. All right, at number 5, I want to talk a little football. I know spring practice is going on. We don't know a ton of what's going on. We'll talk to Matt Moreno about that. But so Dorian Singer came out last week, Shane, and said the difference between Arizona and USC. Here's the quote: "It's a huge difference from the place I came to seeing the competition level. It's like every day you really have to compete because the man next to you is, if not better than you, he's the same." Buy or sell, you'll be rooting for Dorian Singer in the future after those comments.
Well, first of all, this is the first time I'm hearing it. And as I'm hearing you say it, I'm thinking, well, yeah, it's USC. They're a better program.
Don't say that, though.
Nah, I don't.
I think it's Bush League, what he's doing. I think his reaction, Arizona did good for him. They made him a scholarship player.
I understand what you're saying, and maybe you don't want to say that, but I think that's more about where he's at now versus like taking a shot at his last school. And maybe there is an issue there. I know, he had the altercation with Jaden Delora on the field, and so maybe he's a little salty the way things ended there. I don't know, but is he saying anything that's incorrect? I don't really think so.
I think at some point what I've learned, you got to take the high road.
Yeah. I just think we have a different definition in this case, Eric, of what the low road is. I don't really have a problem. If he went and he said, yeah, I couldn't wait to get out of that crappy program. Absolutely, I'm with you.
That's what I read that quote as.
Well,
that's
not how I heard it. So maybe, and look, I haven't seen it. I didn't hear him say it. I haven't seen the video. If I saw that, maybe I'd think differently. But just based on what you just told me, and like I said, heard it just from the first time from you just now. Doesn't ruffle my feathers. Just doesn't.
Coming up next, let's talk to Matt Moreno. The professor joins us here in Wildcat Country.
What's up, Wildcat Country? It's Robbie G, baby, and I am gearing up for a big year with Coach Jetfish and excited to see what the Arizona Wildcats do this football season. And just like the football team, we stepped up our program as well with the official licensed U of A Ice Shaker, baby. Check it out and get it at fanatics.com. Bear down, Arizona. Let's go.
For the 13th time on this program in the history of Wildcat Country, yes, I've counted. We are joined by the professor, Matt Moreno.
That's almost 10% of our episodes, by the way, Eric.
Not quite. I think we're on number 148, 147.
Almost 10%. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. So the professor, Matt Moreno, is with us. Get your pencils ready. Class is in session from Rivals.com. You do a whole bunch of stuff, whether it's national recruiting, goazcats.com. I think everybody who's listened to this podcast knows who you are by now. All right. So my first question is, it's as lame as can be, Matt. Give us some good news when it pertains to anything Arizona. I don't care the sport. Just give me something positive.
Football recruiting is going well. I mean,
Okay.
I think there's some positive momentum there. I think one of the new staff members that they brought in is going to be very helpful to them. Dwayne Aquina has been very good from the sounds of it so far through spring football. And I think there's some positivity on the football side. There's a lot of things moving forward with this program that feels like it's maybe teetering on the edge of taking that next step, which is a really good thing for Arizona.
Well, Eric asked for the good news and you gave it to us. Yeah, Matt, thanks as always for joining us. So since we're already talking football, I don't remember we talked last time was about 3 months ago, but just tell us about some of the freshmen who you think could have an impact on this team right away, just based on, I know you haven't been to spring practice, but just based on who you've seen in high school and who you think might be able to crack that roster right away.
Yeah, I think, there's a couple guys that are making some waves that you hear about, and, talking to our guy, Troy Hutchison, who's out there every day at practice, mentioning some guys, somebody who I think maybe got lost in the shuffle of things, but was at one time a guy, anytime I asked him, like, who's looking at you, who are you talking to recruiting wise, it was like half the country. I mean, it was like half the Power 5 teams. It's Malachi Riley, a receiver out of California. Maybe didn't have the greatest senior season and maybe kind of got lost in the shuffle a little bit. There's just so much talent, especially at receiver in California, that maybe got overlooked a little bit. Got injured, got banged up towards the playoff time. I went out to see him. He warmed up. It's kind of a secret covert warm up from his coaching staff out there. They wanted to kind of send the message to their opponent, which was Mission Viejo. And they wanted to kind of send the message, hey, he might play, but he wasn't going to play. He ended up being a little banged up and warmed up, but didn't end up playing that playoff game. They lost. And so I think just kind of the way the season went for him, he kind of got lost in the shuffle a little bit. He also took his time. He wasn't taking a ton of visits, just kind of was waiting out the process. But Arizona was always the school. Whenever I talked to him, it continued to come up. I think people probably about this time last year, maybe a little bit earlier, he had made back-to-back visits to Arizona. And it was like, oh, because at that time, again, everybody had offered him, everybody was pursuing him. It was like, oh, he made back-to-back visits to Arizona. That's kind of interesting. So I asked him about that a couple different times. He always brought it up. Yeah, I went there back-to-back weeks. Brought his mom out on that second unofficial visit, early on in the process. And Arizona at that point kind of looked like, okay, maybe they're going to be the school to beat. Sure enough, they were the school to beat, and eventually he commits. He had, again, some very, very high-level offers. But for whatever reason, I think he just kind of got lost in the shuffle and people weren't talking about him as much in the recruiting class. Maybe it was because they were the favorite for so long that people kind of forgot about him, but he's a very, very talented player. And then when you lose someone like Dorian Singer, you obviously have an opportunity there for somebody to step up, whether it's Kevin Green or AJ Jones. But Malachi Riley looks like he could potentially be that guy that steps up into that spot, or at least as a contributor, at receiver for Arizona. A little bit thin. He's going to have to hit the weight room pretty hard, I think, over the course of the summer, because you look at him even now, even though he's been, with them through the winter, still a little thin. And that's going to be an issue if he's, getting hit and going down the field and taking some of those shots that Dorian Singer, took last year. Dorian Singer was a little bit bigger, had a little bit more kind of, mass to him. And so he was able to take some of those hits. I think Malachi Riley's going to have to hit the weight room pretty hard. But if he does and doesn't lose that speed, he's going to be a very, very talented player for Arizona. And so I think that's going to be someone to watch for sure.
The other guy I want to mention, speaking of players named after Old Testament books in the Bible, Leviticus Sua. And I bring him up because I got a tip from someone we know who stopped by Arizona football practice and said he was really impressed with him. Thought maybe he'd actually beat out Justin Flo for the inside linebacker position. He was not terribly impressed with just from what he saw with Justin Flo. But just give us your overall impressions of him, and could he be an instant contributor as well?
Yeah, so he stopped by practice the other day. He's not going to be on campus until the summer, so he won't be practicing until later in the year. But it feels like there's a potential for him to step in, and I think at the very least be a contributor. I mean, you look at his body of work, and what he accomplished as a high school player. Mater Dei wasn't able to win the state title again this year, but you look at what he did at that school. I think I've talked about it here before, just the most talented roster in the country, most talented high school team in the country. He started, I believe, 3 years at middle linebacker for that team. That says a lot about what he is, who he is, and what he brings to the table. And I think he's going to be someone who's kind of ready-made for the college game. You don't really have to, he's not going to be someone like Malachi Riley who has to hit the weight room. He's going to be ready to go once he arrives on campus and hits the field with Arizona. So he's definitely someone to be very excited about. Raymond Polito, he's going to be someone that I think is going to be very interesting to watch. And I know he showed up at practice the other day as well, and I think impressed a lot of people who hadn't seen him before. Maybe I'm just jaded because I have seen guys like him before, and I've seen him quite a few times over the year. But he is what you expect from a guy who was committed to Alabama at one point. I mean, he's going to be a big body, somebody that they can probably just throw right in there. Maybe someone like Big Jonah, along those lines where it's like, he's ready to go. He's ready to play right away. It'll give them some flexibility. I do think his kind of future is going to be inside at guard, which I think is counter to a lot of what Arizona fans think. When you think of someone who's a big body, you go throw him out the tackle and he'll work. I think he actually is going to be a little bit better as a guard. And so that sounds like it's going to be the plan for him, is to come in and play some guard, which gives you, a 6'7" guard, which is never bad. And which is what you want to see, when you go up against, other Power 5 teams and you look at across the board and some of the top offensive lines in the Pac-12 and, across the Power 5 schools, that's what they have. They have interior linemen who are 6'6", 6'7", and that's what you want. So there's definitely some interesting, going to be some interesting opportunities there for him. And then, Rhino's already on campus as well. And he's someone that I honestly probably liked more right away as a defensive player, but long-term his potential is as an offensive tackle, offensive lineman. It sounds like he's done some really good things as well. So someone else is probably going to have to add a little bit of weight. Reminds me a lot of Laith Freck when he kind of arrived on campus and he said, okay, everything is there. Everything that they need is there. It's just got to kind of be built up and developed a little bit. The skill set is there. The fundamentals are there. The technique is there. It's just about, can you get him big enough to be, a Power 5, Pac-12 level offensive tackle? And I think they have enough there to kind of make him into a really, really good player. And so I like what he brings to the table. I watched him a couple times this season. He is a maniac. I mean, he is exactly what you're looking for when you want either an offensive or defensive lineman. I mean, he just is 110% every play, is giving it his all. And he is going to be someone who is going to love playing for Arizona. I mean, he really loved playing for his team in Alamany. They weren't very good this season, but he was not taking any plays off, playing both ways. I think he's going to be a fan favorite for a lot of people at Arizona. And to me, maybe he doesn't get on the field this season, but I think he provides some depth this year at the very least. And I think his future is very bright for sure.
Matt, how much better do you expect Arizona's defense to be this year as compared to the last couple of years?
I think it'll be better. I don't think it's going to make an astronomical jump just yet. I think there still probably needs to be another recruiting cycle and another transfer cycle for Johnny Nansen. He's still, I think people forget, he's still in his second year, and he's his second year as a defensive coordinator. He's still got some things that he's going to figure out. I know there's been a lot of criticism about what he's done, and I think there's even fans saying like, well, they need to move on already. It's like, he hasn't really done anything yet. You haven't really seen what he can do. He's working with someone else's players for the most part. As the defense got better later in the season, if you looked at who was on the field, there's a lot of players he recruited. So they were just really young. Now they have some experience. I think they'll be taking another step forward. You're going to have some guys that are going to be, within the system for another year. But I think you still have to work in some of those other players. I think that's going to be the challenge a little bit. Do you work in how effective is someone like Justin Flo going to be? Because there's going to be a lot of pressure on him. Oren Patu, a edge rusher from Cal, did some nice things at Cal, but didn't play a whole lot. So you're putting a lot on him. There's just some, Bill Norton played for a very, very, very good team, but was mostly a special teams guy, maybe contributed here and there along the defensive line. You're putting a lot on him to be an instant contributor. Yes, Hunter Echols brought that last year, and I think that's what you have to gravitate toward if you're an Arizona fan, is you go look what they did with someone like Hunter Echols, who was in a similar position, highly rated, highly recruited guy, didn't get a ton of time at USC, but was effective in that time. And then once he had his opportunity to be on the field, every down or mostly every down, he really shined. And so I think that's what you look at when you look at the transfers for Arizona. But those guys have to, I think, to a man, each one of those guys on defense, Tyler Manoa as well, they all have something to prove. And until they do that, I think it's hard to say, yes, they're going to make this huge jump defensively. But I do think adding, Genesis Smith on the back end as a safety is a very good addition for Arizona. There's been some positive things, speaking of another freshman who's already there. There's been a lot of positive things said about him, and what he brings to the table. I really liked what he brought to the table as a high school player. I think quietly there were a lot of schools that are really kind of prioritizing him, and he always seemed to like Arizona quite a bit. But yeah, I think once you add some of these new pieces, I think it's going to be something that develops, but a lot of those guys are younger. And so I think it's going to take some time. So I think there is going to be a jump. I think the expectation should be that there should be a jump. I don't think they can't go backward. That's for sure.
Nope.
But I think there should be some expectations, maybe a little bit of pressure, a little bit more pressure on Johnny Nansen to start delivering a little bit more. But I think the bigger jump is going to come next year once they have a chance to really, handle the recruiting class a little bit more, get back on track with recruiting, because it was a little bit different last year compared to the year before. I really like what they've done recruiting wise so far. And so I think they're going to build on that. And I really do think that, that big jump will happen next year. But I think you need to see some progress this year, and that's where it starts. And I do think they'll see that.
All right, I want to ask you about the transfer portal, specifically a team that you mentioned, USC. So since we had you on last, Arizona lost a couple of players to Lincoln Riley's squad in Dorian Singer and I believe Keon Bars. If you're Arizona, are you worried every year that USC is going to poach your best players? Like, are we going to be freaking out about T-Mac next offseason? What's your take on that?
It's tough. I mean, it's going to come down to the individual. I mean, you probably could have been freaking out about T-Mac this last offseason, because I'm sure there was a lot of talk of, hey, is he just going to go back to Oregon where he was originally committed because they had a successful season or whatever. But until you're consistently winning games and winning 9 and 10 games and competing for the Pac-12 title, there's going to be that temptation every offseason for a lot of players. And I think there's going to be that worry for Arizona fans every offseason for those players, because I think fans are starting to learn it, whether they like it or not, that this game is not about them, and college football is no longer about them, and it's about the players, and the players are going to dictate quite a bit. It's not even necessarily about the coaches anymore. It used to be kind of all about the coaches and the programs. It's very different. The players hold a lot of the cards in their hand, and they're able to do a lot of different things because of how much NIL has come into play, the transfer portal, all those things. A lot of it is in their hands. And so it's going to be, I think, for a lot of teams outside of the upper tier, upper echelon teams, it's going to be about, man, who are we going to lose? Who could we potentially lose? And, Arizona could potentially be that way on the basketball side. I mean, I'm sure there's programs looking at a place like Arizona, and I'm sure we'll get to that here soon, but where they go, well, who's Arizona looking at? What spots do they need? Because I have a really good, player at a high mid-major that scored a lot of points, and maybe, or a point guard, or, an off the ball type of shooting guard that I want to make sure I keep away from a school like Arizona. So it goes both ways. I mean, you want to be the haves and not the have-nots. And so for Arizona, I think there's always going to be that every offseason, just the way it is, the way the type of football program it is right now. But if they continue to win games and build on what Jedd Fisch has done so far and get up to that time when they're winning 9 and 10 games a year, I think it's going to be the case will be made for itself for these players to just say, why do I have to go anywhere? I'm doing everything I want to do here. I'm accomplishing everything I want to accomplish here. I'm just going to stick around. But I think until that happens, I think every offseason is going to be kind of similar, where you go, okay, who's coming and going? But that's kind of every team. I mean, USC lost some players as well. So it's kind of every team that is going to go through that. And if you have a good player, there's probably a chance that there's a very good, decent shot that he ends up in the portal.
So let's pivot to basketball, Matt. Arizona's an interesting spot after Kirk Kriisa decided to go to the transfer portal. Adama Ball wasn't a surprise. We're waiting on Azuolas Tubelis' decision. It certainly sounds at this point he'll probably decide to take the next step in his career. Based on what you know about Tommy Lloyd and just your information at Rivals, are you confident he'll be able to fill out this roster with a combination of high school guys, transfers, international guys? What can you tell us?
100%. I mean, if there's fans that think that he's somehow not going to be able to fill out a roster,
when I say that, I mean like fill out a roster with a potential top 25 team next season, I guess more specifically.
I think so. I mean, I think the thing is with Tommy Lloyd that everyone's learned is that there's some international player that's going to be stashed away that he will eventually be able to pull over. I mean, Henry Visar was somebody who was like, if you're in the know, you knew about it. I mean, you knew there was a potential possibility for Arizona to land him at some point. And there's a bunch of those guys out there. I mean, there's a lot of the international game is really growing at this level where you have players who are maybe not ready to make that jump to the NBA or don't want to go to the G League, but are like, hey, I want to play some college basketball, that are very, very good. And it seems like there's more of them each and every year. And so I think it's great for Arizona to have a coach who's very tied into that, has been doing that for 2 decades and finding those international players. So I think any year international players are always going to be in play. And then now the transfer portal, it's going to be, something that they're going to use every year. They're going to utilize every year. I mean, there's no better year to see the impact of the transfer portal than this year in the NCAA tournament. When you look at the Final Four teams, it's transfers all over the place. And that's one of those things where you go, that's just the game. Again, something that fans, I think, are going to have to just kind of come to grips with and have to understand that this is just the game. I mean, it's the way it's gone. If you don't like where you stand a year into your career, you're probably gone. And coaches are probably okay with it. And the players are going, I'm going to try and find somewhere to play and get me some minutes. So it's not necessarily fun. It's not what everyone grew up with, but it's kind of the reality of the situation right now. And so, Taron Armstrong from somewhere like Cal Baptist is someone that's been linked to Arizona already. Graham Ike from Wyoming is somebody else who's been involved and been linked to Arizona. As the NCAA tournament kind of comes to a close, I think you're going to see a lot more names start to pop up. And as these conversations start to happen, these exit interviews start to happen at the end of the season, I think you're going to see a lot more names pop up. Obviously, Kirk Kriisa was not somebody that everybody had pegged as being a possibility. And now he's already on a visit, at West Virginia and taking visits and looking at his options. And so that happened in a span of a few days. So you just never know. We could be talking today and there's someone that we're not even thinking about that is going to be, potentially on Arizona's roster in a couple of weeks. So it's just kind of how it goes. Everything moves so rapidly with the transfer portal. You talk to a lot of players who either enter it or went through the process and they go, it's quick. I have to go through this process. I have to look at my options. I want to find a home. I don't want to waste any time. Coaches are saying, I want to get them, through this relationship that, these relationships that used to be 3 and 4 years in the making, or at least a couple years in the making, are now spread out over about 10 days. And you have to decide, hey, do I like this guy? Do I not like this guy? So it's a very difficult process. And I do think in the next couple of weeks here, you're going to see a lot more players enter the transfer portal, a lot more options. And there's probably somebody that we're not even talking about or even thinking about right now who's going to end up on Arizona's roster next season and probably end up playing a lot of minutes and making an impact. So those are just a couple of the names right now that have been thrown out, but I'm sure there's going to be, 10 more names that we talk about when it comes to Arizona potential transfer portal options, because they do have a roster to fill out, and there's probably going to be some more guys that are leaving Arizona as well. So I think that's the topic when you talk about, the NCAA tournament and you see coaches or get emotional or players who get emotional. They understand this team that I have right now that I was part of is not going to be the same next year, whether I like it or not. It's just so difficult to keep teams together from year to year. And so I think there's going to be plenty more movement with the transfer portal. I think Tommy Lloyd will have no issue putting together a very competitive and very impressive roster once again.
Yeah, it's a danger of recording a podcast just once a week like we do. By the time we get this out, it might be irrelevant. But Matt, I think the two guys I'm really confident will be back next season for Arizona, and it's really just these two I'm really confident in, and I could be wrong about them as well. Zumar Ballo and Kylan Boswell, both because they were Tommy Lloyd's guys from the start. Do you agree with that? Or do you think there's a possibility that other guys beyond Tubelis might decide to leave as well?
Yeah, I think I think anybody, even if you look at a roster and you go, who's not playing? I think that's where you start and you go, who isn't playing? Do they have a chance of playing this year? And if the answer is, you find your guys and you go no and no, then that's probably a good candidate to enter the transfer portal. It's just the way the game is. A lot of those bench players didn't get a chance to play, didn't get a big opportunity to play down the stretch. They're still very young, and I think the sell to them would be, hey, you're still very young, and there's plenty of development to go. Look at someone like Umar Ballo, who had to sit for a while on a very good team, and then eventually becomes a starter and somebody who's the Pac-12 most improved player. And so I think that's the sell from the coaching staff, but sometimes players and the people around them have different opinions of where they think they should go and how it should work out. So I think that's where you start. I don't think there's going to be any more, huge surprises with guys that contributed. I guess they wouldn't be surprises if we were talking about them, but yeah, I would agree. I think Kylan Boswell to me feels like he is the future at the guard position in a lot of ways. They could bring in transfers, they can do what they want, but when you saw what he did, especially late in the season, there were a lot of fans, and probably contributed to why Kirk Kriisa is no longer part of the program. A lot of fans going, you need to play Kylan Boswell more. Why isn't Kylan Boswell in the game more? And so I think he proved that he's very capable of taking care of this team and running the point guard position and contributing in a bigger role. And obviously was coming off the injury this year and didn't really get it going until kind of midway through the year. And then once he did, he looked very, very good. And so there's still some things that he's going to need to work on in his game, but he feels like the future. I think people maybe forget, or maybe they don't. At one time, he was, a top 10 player in the country. I mean, it's not like he's some nobody. He was a very talented player, reclassified. And if I were a betting man, I would say he's poised to have a very, very big season. And I think he's going to be a very big part of this team. And so I do agree that those two guys feel like they're pretty safe. We, again, never know what kind of conversations go on. But I do think there's going to be some more roster movement. And I would just look at those guys that aren't playing, because that's kind of the easiest way to do it. Is it's usually people who are unhappy with their playing time. And as we talked about, from year to year, if you don't play, you have that easy out of, hey, I didn't play this year. I know I can go to either a smaller school, different program altogether, different conference, and get some time. And so I do think there's going to be some more movement. It's just kind of the nature of the game. But I would agree with you that about Ballo and Boswell. And again, I think a lot of the offseason, it's kind of up in the air because of, as you mentioned, Azuolas Tubelis, which I don't think, and I know a lot of people say he's gone, or they think he's gone. International players very much value that degree. And I think they value their time in college. I don't think it's an open and shut case that he's gone and on to the NBA. I think there is that slight, maybe even more than a slight chance that he ends up returning.
Okay, interesting.
And there's quite the nugget right there. All right, last question for you, Matt, and we always appreciate having you on. I asked you this, I believe, in December when we last had you on the program. Big 12 or Pac-12, where does Arizona ultimately end up within the next 6 months, a year, or beyond?
At this point, it feels like if you were going anywhere, you would have made a move. You would have made a decision. It feels like they've kind of anchored themselves to the Pac-12 the longer this thing has gone on. It just feels like it would be less likely to happen now. I'm probably more leaning towards Big 12 than Pac-12 than I was before. I'm not all the way, hey, they're going to the Big 12, but probably more leaning that way than I was before. I still think in the end they're going to stick with the Pac-12, only because, like I just said, at this point, they've kind of attached themselves to the Pac-12 and dug in and said, this is where we're going to be. And that's kind of been, again, the company line has been, Pac-12 is going to be great, and there's going to be a lot of money for everyone to kind of spread out. And that feels like the future for them. Is it the right decision? We'll know in time. But to me, it feels like it's still going to end up being the Pac-12 for Arizona when all is said and done. I think it's probably more likely now that the Big 12 could be in play than I thought before. But I think ultimately just the message, it would be a complete shift from the message that's been coming out from the president, from Arizona, from the Pac-12 to see them leave. So I think the more likely scenario is that maybe there's a team playing in the Final Four that is going to be entering the Pac-12.
FAU?
Yeah, they're going to be playing across the country,
Okay.
a little bit closer to Southern California.
Mm-hmm.
Gets them back into that market with USC and UCLA leaving a little bit. That probably feels more likely than Arizona, leaving to the Big 12, but a lot of dominoes still to fall. A lot of this is taking time. I think it feels like maybe it's getting a little bit closer. I think we'll probably have a more clear vision and idea of where this thing is going within the next month. I think for everybody involved, they probably want to get through the basketball season, let that kind of settle, and then you kind of go from there. But I think it's probably more likely that Arizona stays in the Pac-12 and you see some more expanded teams within the Pac-12. You see it stay maybe as the Pac-12 as opposed to the Pac-10, and they take it from there. But end of the day, that was a long-winded answer. I think Arizona stays in the Pac-12.
And there you have it. Class is now dismissed. Matt Moreno, the professor, as I like to call you, thank you so much for joining Shane and I here on Wildcat Country. And since you've been on 13 times, that you'll be on again soon. So we really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'll mark it in my calendar.
One Gem Mint PSA 10 after another. That's what so many card collectors, including yours truly, have experienced when they submit their cards for grading through DT Sports Cards. They are an authorized PSA dealer, which means if you submit your cards through them, you'll reap all the benefits of being a PSA subscriber without actually having to subscribe. That means you can take advantage of PSA's bulk submission rate, even if you want to submit just a single card. And for just $2 a card, DT Sports Cards will give your cards a thorough review and tell you if they're likely to receive your desired grades for them. I've submitted baseball, football, basketball, hockey, and yes, even Pokemon, and have received so many PSA 10s because DT Sports Cards has helped me send in the right cards and save my money on the rest. Check them out for yourself at dtsportscards.com or on Twitter and Instagram at DT_sportscards.
Want to thank Matt Moreno for joining us. Great intel from him. Shane, this segment is brought to you by DT Sports Cards, and I know that they just keep making you money over at DT Sports Cards.
Yeah, I actually I cracked an Austin Matthews Young Guns from another is an HGA, which is not nearly as reputable company as PSA, because it got a gem mint grade. I cracked it, sent it in to DT Sports Cards. They said, go ahead and send it in, because they check your cards for $2 a card, and it just came back as a PSA 10. So that is a significant upgrade from a financial perspective. And so I wouldn't have sent it in without them taking a look at it. So definitely check them out if you're looking to get some cards graded, and you only want to send in cards that are going to get the grade you want. Definitely check them out.
If you want to become a sports card aficionado and rich like Shane Dale, go to DT Sports Cards, because they will definitely help you out. So good stuff there. Shane, I don't think there's a lot to talk about that's very good with the baseball and softball teams. They both got swept this past weekend. The baseball team can't win on the road. The softball team seems to have the same Pac-12 issues that they did last year. Do we have a Chip Hale and Caitlin Lowe problem that we need to discuss?
No, not yet. Well, look, the Pac-12 on the softball side is loaded, and so it's early in the season. They've been close games, so I'm not panicking yet. And again, I think most coaches in general deserve 3 years. And look, Caitlin Lowe's Wildcats came out of nowhere to get to the College World Series last year, so I'm still confident they're going to be fine. It's just going to take a little while. And Chip Hale, they won 8 in a row, and then they like I said, they can't win on the road. They got swept at ASU, which is never a good look. But like Caitlin Lowe, I think Chip deserves 3 years. And look, the baseball program is a little bit more of an uphill battle, because it's, for whatever reason, and you feel like it should be considered a national powerhouse considering its history, but maybe it's just been a little inconsistent. Maybe it's kind of like UConn and men's basketball. They have their great years, but they have a lot of down years too. So I'd give Chip a little more time. I think my expectation for the baseball team is for them to become perennial top 25 and maybe make the College World Series once every 5 years. I think that's a reasonable expectation. For the softball program, I expect a little better. Mike Candrea is obviously a legend, but he had trouble getting to the College World Series toward the end of his career, and so I think there's more of a rebuilding job there than you might think. So I would say if both teams are 3-6 at this point of the conference schedule next year, I'd be concerned. But at this point, I think we need to give them a little more time and just be patient.
I think we have a Chip Hale problem, Shane. I think Caitlin can recruit, and I don't think the recruiting is the problem for softball. I think with baseball, that's the problem with hiring a guy that's not a college baseball guy. Just like when you hire a pro coach a former pro coach to coach in college football or basketball, you don't know how they're going to recruit.
I thought you were going to mention a certain guy by name and a former coach in Tempe.
Well, I mean, obviously Herm had he was able to recruit somewhat. I mean, Antonio Pierce really helped him before that whole thing unraveled. But the fact of the matter is, I am not necessarily a fan of hiring a guy, and albeit Jed Fish has been the exception. Jed Fish has been a pro guy that came in and he's hit the ground running recruiting.
By the way, his connections, you see all the coaches that were at his coaching clinic, it was a who's who list. That's
Carroll, Zach Taylor. Yeah. I mean, it's
Brian Billick was there as well.
Mike Smith, former Falcons coach. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. Great stuff.
So my thing is, like, that formula sometimes works. I don't think it's going to work for Arizona. I thought the Hale hire was, at the time, I was like, okay. I'm not. If Arizona bombs and misses the tournament as they are on track to do, I think you need to take a long, hard look and see what else we can do. I think you need a guy who can. That's what Jay Johnson was so good at, Shane. You can say whatever you want about Jay. We always had a good, relationship with him on this program, but he was able to recruit like crazy.
I would give Chip at least one more year, even if this one ends up being a stinker. And if nothing else, we know Chip Hale, and I had Chip Hale on the show a year ago. You weren't available for the interview, but he said, and I believe him when he says, look, this is a destination job. This is hopefully my last job, because he loves Arizona. He loves the university. He's not going to bolt like Jay Johnson did. So if Arizona has success under him, and I think it's worth exploring it, because he will stay. Yeah. He will stay. So he needs at least a third season. And look, if they miss if they miss the tournament this year and next year, then maybe I'm on board, but not until then.
All right. So then here's the thing. Would you agree that if Arizona continues to bomb as they have lately, and can't win on the road, even though they have 8 games coming up starting at home.
Yeah.
Would you say that it's time that Chip makes some changes to his staff?
Potentially, yeah. It's certainly on the pitching side, it needs to get better. Hitting's not really a problem. On the pitching side, it needs to get better.
It's a big problem.
Yeah,
pitching is a big problem.
Yeah, that needs to improve, and that was Arizona became very good under Jay Johnson. And that, I mean, not great. I mean, they're still relied more on their hitting, but they had some outstanding pitchers who have since gone pro. So, the whole MLB training ground hashtag with Jay Johnson, I think, was very effective, and Chip Hale's got to follow that model, and I think he's trying to do so. But again, patience. Give the guy 3 years. I think it's just, we're, from talking about Johnny Nansen halfway through last season, should we fire him, to now should we fire Chip Hale with 1.5 years into his tenure? You need a little more patience.
Okay, but at any job, Shane, if you look at it as a sales job, if you go into a sales job and you're not selling, should you get 2 years? No. I mean, obviously different time frame than it is for coaching, but obviously you get 4 to 6 months, and if you don't sell, you're looking for another job.
Consider this, Eric. Consider this. In year 2, Sean Miller got to the Elite 8, but that was largely because Derek Williams, who sort of fell in his lap as a commit who decommitted from USC, had another worldly season. Year 3, they missed the tournament. Year 4, they got in as a 6th seed. They got to the Sweet 16. It wasn't really until year 5 that Arizona became a perennial contender for several years. Now, I'm not expecting Chip Hale to get that level on the baseball side, but what I'm saying is it takes a little bit of time. Sometimes you have instant success and sometimes you don't. But
look at Jay Johnson. Jay got there, in his first or second year to the College World Series, one out away from winning a title, or, one RBI away.
It happens. It's an exception to the rule is all I'm saying.
Okay. All right. So speaking of Final Fours, let's make some picks on next weekend's Final Four. I know we're recording this on Sunday night. It's been just wacky. I mean, this tournament, let me just say this. And before we make picks, the unpredictability is cool and all, but I would like to see the best teams win. Arizona was one of the best teams. This tournament, the way it's set up, does not reward the best teams. I think we all know that. So the women's bracket does more so in that you get a chance on your home court. As we saw, Stanford lost on their home court. Indiana, as number 1 seeds, lost.
Yeah.
I think at some point this tournament needs to focus on the Blue Bloods being great. Because I'm sorry, but FAU, San Diego State, it's interesting to those of us who love college basketball, but to the casual fan, they don't give 2 flying hoots about that game.
This was going to happen eventually. This kind of Final Four was going to happen eventually in a best-of-1 format. The NCAA tournament is the most brutal, most unforgiving format in all of sports in the United States and maybe on the whole planet, because you have one bad game or one bad half and everything you accomplished the last 5 months is gone. So in most cases, if there was best 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 5, we'd be talking about Alabama and Houston, and I don't know about Arizona, but the 1s and 2 seeds would mostly be there, but it's a best of 1. So I think the answer is, if you want to make sure that the top teams in the regular season make it to the Final Four more often, and last year that mostly they did, and most years they do, then you got to change the format to other than best of 1, and that's never going to happen. And that's one of the things that people love about the tournament.
But I think the tweak that is simple is you play the first rounds at the top 16 teams get to host, just like the women's. Why do we do it on the women's side, but it's in the men's it's not? Imagine from a fan's perspective, it's really expensive to travel to random cities when you have an elite team. I mean,
I think on the women's side, my guess is it's probably tougher to sell tickets. I
agree.
To do that. That's probably why that happens.
But it should happen. Can you imagine McHale Center if Arizona's playing in the first and second round of the tournament?
Yeah.
It would be epic.
Yeah.
No, epic.
I agree with you, but I think I don't know if this is going to be the new normal, Eric. It's been a crazy year. I mean, remember just 2 years ago, the top 2 teams all season made it to the championship game, and there were clear favorite. Look, this year it was every Power 5 team lost at least 6 games. That's insane. It's an anomaly. True. I don't think this is going to be the new normal. If it is, then maybe we start looking at that. But look, the reason like Chris Berman says, that's why they play the games. Why schedule the games if you know who's going to win? If you're just going to, advance the 1 or the 2 seeds anyway. And if you can't beat a 16 seed or a 15 seed, you don't deserve to go to the next round.
Tell us what you think will happen in the Final Four.
I've been wrong about everything so far. I would go against whatever I say here. Well, I was thinking that the UConn-Texas winner would win the whole thing, but now that Texas is out, UConn looks almost unbeatable right now. They won every game by double digits. It's hard to pick against them. Miami came out of nowhere and really had a great rally against Texas on Sunday, just a few hours before we were recording this. I don't know who's going to stop Danny Hurley's guys at this point. So I think they probably advance. I think on the other side, San Diego State, which, by the way, what do you think of that foul call at the end of the San Diego State Creighton game?
Brutal, terrible. Just once again, officiating getting in the way. That
you don't think it was the right call?
No call? Absolutely not. Has to be like a blatant foul to call it at that stage. I thought Creighton was robbed.
He got him in the in the stomach.
Very minor. You got to let that go at that situation.
All right. Well, be that as it may, I think San Diego State probably wins, beats FAU. But that line was actually kind of suspect. Was FAU was only a 1.5 point underdog. It made me think, does Vegas? It's one of those things. Does Vegas know something we don't? And so, but I think their run ends against San Diego State. I think UConn. I think it might actually be kind of a boring Final Four, unfortunately. I think UConn's probably going to cruise. They're going to beat Miami, and that might be a close game. And I think they whether it's San Diego State or FAU, I think they win by double digits in the championship game.
Interesting. Listen, my take on it is this. I think UConn is the best team. I think UConn wins probably fairly easily. I think they're going to dispatch Miami pretty easily. On the other side, I think that first game is actually really interesting. Listen, FAU's won 35 games.
Yeah.
They're 35-3 for a reason. They're really good. San Diego State has been phenomenal. 8-game win streak, and I believe they've held every team during that streak to 64 or less points. Yeah. I think their defense will prevail in a very close game. And I think the final will be hard to watch. I think UConn will blow out San Diego State. I think it's very conceivable that UConn could win every game in this tournament by 15 or more points.
Yeah.
Maybe Miami keeps it close. Miami's going to have to shoot the lights out to keep it close. UConn looks that good.
One reason to root against UConn, other than if we don't like, if we don't like Bobby Hurley, we don't like his brother either, is that I believe Arizona is still the only 4 seed to ever win the national championship. UConn would be the second. So if we'd like to have that distinction as the only 4 seed, then we want someone else to win.
You heard it right there from Shane Dale. So thanks to Matt Moreno for joining us. Great to hear from him. Great to catch up with the professor. For Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks for listening. And as always, bear down.